During a luxurious event, a young employee notices a girl standing alone, detached from the music and the world. As she approaches, a gentle gesture of dance breaks the silence and awakens emotions long asleep. In that moment, a new family is born, united not by blood, but by affection, courage, and shared steps. The afternoon sun bathed the gardens of the Hawthorne Manor, an imposing residence in Kensington, one of London's most exclusive boroughs. The place, normally silent and reserved, was filled with the elegant buzz of executives in formal attire. Tech Britannia, one of the country's largest technology companies, was celebrating its 20th anniversary with an event for investors, partners, and high-ranking employees. Beatrice Oliver, 28, watched everything with a mixture of admiration and nervousness. Recently hired as a child development specialist for the company's social responsibility program, this was her first official day. Her curly hair was tied back in a discreet bun, and she wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, trying to look at ease among people who moved millions with a simple handshake. "Beatrice, come meet some people," called Martha Price, the Director of Human Resources, leading her through groups of lively conversations. "This is Richard, our Chief Financial Officer, and this is Louise, from Marketing." Beatrice smiled and shook hands, repeating names she knew she would forget in minutes. Her gaze, however, was captured by something unusual in the corner of the grand hall. A girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old was sitting alone, near one of the enormous windows that overlooked the garden. She wore a delicate pink dress, but the hem was slightly rumpled, her patent leather shoes a bit dusty. In her hands, she held a small music box that she wound repeatedly. "Who is that child?" Beatrice asked Martha discreetly. "Ah," Martha hesitated, lowering her voice. "That's Sophia, Edward Miles's daughter." "Edward Miles, the owner of the manor and CEO of the company?" Beatrice's eyes widened. "Exactly. He rarely brings her to events, but today the nanny fell ill at the last minute. The girl has, well, she has a neurodevelopmental disorder. She doesn't speak to anyone, doesn't interact. The staff has been instructed not to bother her." Beatrice nodded, but continued to watch the girl. There was something about that image, the isolated child amidst the luxurious party, that deeply troubled her. As a child development specialist, her instinct told her that this solitude was not healthy. "Does she always stay like that, alone?" "As far as I know, yes," Martha replied, checking her watch. "Edward keeps her out of the spotlight. They say that ever since Francis passed, he's never been the same, and the girl has completely withdrawn." "Francis? His wife? It was a terrible loss about 5 years ago. I'd rather not go into the details. Edward is a private man, and we all respect that." Martha was called over by another group and moved away, leaving Beatrice with her thoughts. The young educator continued to watch Sophia. The girl didn't seem sad or distressed, just absent, as if she were in another world, oblivious to all the commotion. The music box continued to be wound, but Sophia didn't seem to hear the melody emanating from it. Against all recommendations, Beatrice felt irresistibly drawn to that corner of the hall. With careful steps, she approached the girl, as one would approach a small bird so as not to startle it. "Hi, Sophia," she said softly, crouching down to be at the child's eye level. "I'm Beatrice. May I sit here with you?" Sophia didn't answer, nor did she even look at her. She continued to turn the crank of the music box with precise, repetitive movements. Beatrice sat at a respectful distance. "What a beautiful song," she commented, tilting her head slightly to listen. "It sounds like a waltz." For a brief moment, Sophia's fingers stopped turning the crank. Her deep brown eyes moved slightly in Beatrice's direction, but soon returned to staring into space. "Do you like to dance, Sophia?" Beatrice asked, more on intuition than for any rational reason. The girl remained silent, but her fingers tapped lightly on the music box. "I loved to dance when I was little," Beatrice continued. "I wasn't very good, to be honest, but I had a lot of fun." She smiled, reminiscing. "Sometimes dancing says things that words can't express." Sophia slowly turned her head toward Beatrice. Her eyes now observed her with surprising intensity. On an impulse, Beatrice extended her hand. Would you like to dance with me? Just for a little bit? The hall was still bustling. No one seemed to notice what was happening in that discreet corner. Sophia looked at Beatrice's outstretched hand, then at the music box, and back at Beatrice. After what felt like an eternity, the girl placed her small hand on the young educator's. Beatrice's heart quickened. Delicately, she stood up, still holding the child's hand. Sophia left the music box on the seat and allowed Beatrice to lead her to a clear space not far away but out of the path of the guests. Let's follow the music in your head, Beatrice suggested. It can be anyone you like. Sophia remained still for a few seconds. Then, very subtly, she began to sway her body. It wasn't exactly a dance, but a rhythmic, almost imperceptible movement. Beatrice followed her, adapting to the girl's silent rhythm. Gradually, Sophia's movements became more defined. A small step to the side, a restrained twirl. Beatrice followed her with light movements, never imposing, only suggesting. In a few minutes, they were dancing a silent waltz created in the moment. It was then that Beatrice realized the buzz in the hall had subsided. Curious glances were turning toward the corner where they danced. Some guests whispered, others watched with expressions ranging from surprise to emotion. It seems we have an audience, Beatrice whispered, smiling at Sophia. The girl didn't respond verbally, but her eyes were more alive now, and her steps more confident. For the first time, a faint smile appeared on her lips. It was at that moment that Beatrice noticed the imposing figure approaching. Tall, with greying hair at the temples and a perfectly tailored suit, Edward Miles had a presence that naturally commanded attention. His face, though marked by lines of constant worry, was undeniably handsome. But what caught Beatrice's attention most were his eyes, exactly like Sophia's, deep and intense. Edward stopped a few paces from them, watching with an indescribable expression. It wasn't anger, nor exactly surprise. It was as if he were seeing a ghost. Beatrice felt her body go cold. She had disobeyed the explicit instruction not to interact with the girl. Now she would face the consequences before the company's CEO on her first day of work. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miles," she began, slowing the dance. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't stop," he said, his voice low and controlled. Beatrice hesitated, confused. "Please," Edward added, in a tone that was almost a plea. "Continue." Obeying, Beatrice resumed the gentle dance with Sophia, who seemed oblivious to her father's presence and the sudden attention they were receiving. Edward Miles remained motionless, watching every movement. The guests, sensing the tension in the air, discreetly returned to their conversations, though many curious glances were still directed at the trio. After a few minutes, the silent dance naturally came to an end. Sophia let go of Beatrice's hand and returned to her seat, picking up the music box as if nothing had happened. Edward approached Beatrice. "What is your name?" he asked, in a tone that revealed none of his emotions. "Beatrice Oliver, sir. I was hired today for the Social Responsibility Program," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Beatrice," he repeated, looking at her intently, "I would like to speak with you in my office, please." It was not a request that could be refused. With her heart racing, Beatrice nodded and followed Edward through the hall, feeling dozens of curious eyes on her back. Edward's office was on the second floor of the manor, away from the party's noise. It was an elegant but sober room with bookshelves covering an entire wall and a privileged view of the gardens. Beatrice noticed the absence of family photographs. Only abstract paintings and corporate awards decorated the space. Edward closed the door and gestured for Beatrice to take an armchair. He did not sit himself, preferring to stand near the window. "What you did down there," he began, "was extraordinary. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life." Beatrice remained silent, unsure how to respond. Edward was staring at her with a disconcerting intensity. "For 5 years," he continued, "Sophia has not shown any reaction like that with strangers. With anyone, really." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture that revealed his vulnerability. Do you have experience with children like her? I have a master's degree in special education, Beatrice replied. I worked for 4 years at the New Path Institute with neurodivergent children. I see, Edward nodded. And what made you come to the corporate sector? The question caught Beatrice by surprise. I believe I can make a difference by implementing large-scale inclusive programs. When I heard about Tech Britannia's project for public schools, I was immediately interested. Edward walked to his desk, thoughtful. I have a different proposal for you, he said finally. I would like you to work directly with Sophia as her private tutor. I can offer you double your current salary. Beatrice blinked, stunned. But I was just hired by the company. I have a contract, commitments. I'm the CEO, Edward replied simply. I can resolve that with a phone call. The proposal was tempting, but something didn't feel right. Why me? You hardly know me. Edward looked out the window at the gardens below. I saw how Sophia responded to you. In 5 minutes you achieved more than specialized therapists have in years. I can't explain it, but... He hesitated, choosing his words. It felt right. Before Beatrice could respond, a soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Martha Price entered, visibly nervous. Sorry to interrupt, Edward, but the Japanese investors have arrived and are asking for you. Edward nodded. I'll be there in a moment. Turning back to Beatrice, he added, Think about my offer. We can talk more tomorrow. That night in her small apartment in Chinatown, Beatrice couldn't sleep. Edward Miles's proposal was as surprising as the whole situation with Sophia. There was something about that silent child that had touched her deeply, the way she had danced, how her eyes had come to life for a brief moment. The next morning, Beatrice communicated her decision to Martha, who didn't seem surprised. Edward Miles always gets what he wants, the HR director commented. Be successful, Beatrice. That little girl needs someone like you. 3 days later, Beatrice arrived at the Hawthorne Manor with 2 suitcases and a heart full of expectations and fears. A middle-aged housekeeper, Mrs. Celeste, greeted her with a warm smile. Welcome, Dr. Oliver. I'll show you to your rooms. Just Beatrice, please, she replied, following the housekeeper through the spacious entrance hall. The suite intended for Beatrice was on the same floor as Sophia's room, in a side wing of the manor. It was spacious, elegantly decorated in pastel tones, with a small balcony overlooking the gardens. Sophia is in her room now, Mrs. Celeste informed her. Mr. Miles, ask that you settle in first and then come down for lunch at 12:30. He will be present to discuss the routine. Lunch was a quiet affair. Edward asked practical questions about Beatrice's background and briefly explained Sophia's condition. The doctors diagnosed her with autism spectrum disorder with atypical features. She spoke normally until she was 3. Then, she just stopped. Conventional therapies have had no effect. I understand, Beatrice replied, noticing that Sophia, sitting at the table, was pushing her food around without eating, completely disconnected from the conversation. May I ask about her routines? What does she like? To do? Edward seemed momentarily uncomfortable. Sophia has a very structured routine. Private lessons in the morning with tutors who come to the house. Occupational therapy 3 times a week. The rest of the time... He hesitated. She mostly stays in her room with some puzzles and books. Beatrice noted that he avoided mentioning dance or music. And what about the music box she had at the event? Edward's expression visibly hardened. It's just an object she's attached to. It has no special importance. But Beatrice knew from professional experience that attachment objects for children with ASD were rarely chosen. At random, there was an emotional connection there that Edward seemed determined to ignore. In the following days, Beatrice established a routine with Sophia. The girl was docile, followed basic instructions, but remained in her inner world, rarely making eye contact. Beatrice respected her space, gradually introducing sensory activities and simple games. It was during one of these sessions, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, that Beatrice noticed something curious. Sophia, seemingly absorbed in a puzzle, began to rock subtly to the rhythm of the rain hitting the window. It wasn't a random movement. There was a cadence, almost like a silent dance. Following an impulse, Beatrice turned on the small radio in the corner of the activity room. A soft classical piece filled the air. Sophia's movements immediately changed, synchronizing with the new melody. "Do you like this music, Sophia?" Beatrice asked softly. As expected, there was no verbal response, but the girl's eyes briefly met Beatrice's, a small miracle that had been happening more frequently. When the music ended, Sophia stood up and walked to her school backpack, taking out the small music box. Bringing it to Beatrice, she turned the crank and let the delicate melody fill the room. "It's beautiful," Beatrice commented. "Do you want to dance again?" The girl didn't answer, but she stood in the center of the room as if waiting. Beatrice stood up and, just like at the event, extended her hand. Sophia accepted it, initiating a soft, restrained dance. They were so absorbed that they didn't notice Mrs. Celeste at the door, watching with tears in her eyes. The housekeeper quietly moved away. But that evening, when Edward returned from work, Beatrice knew from his expression that he had already been informed. "I heard you and Sophia danced today," he said during dinner, his tone neutral. "Yes," Beatrice replied, deciding to be direct. "Music seems to unlock something in her. It's a form of non-verbal communication that works." Edward took a long sip of wine, as if gathering courage. Sophia should not be encouraged to dance. "May I ask why?" Beatrice questioned, keeping her voice calm despite her bewilderment. "Because I'm asking you to," he replied, cutting off any discussion. That night, restless, Beatrice decided to explore more of the manor. The silence was absolute as she walked through the corridors, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the windows. On the third floor, she found what appeared to be an old music room, a covered piano, shelves of dusty sheet music. On a small desk in the corner, she found a photo album. She hesitated, feeling like an intruder, but curiosity won. The first pages showed a younger, smiling Edward, an almost unrecognizable version of the austere man she knew. Beside him, in almost every photo, was a stunning woman with dark hair and a radiant smile. "Francis," Beatrice whispered, recognizing the same eyes as Sophia. As she flipped through the album, Beatrice discovered more. Francis on a stage wearing a tutu. Francis with a group of dancers. Francis receiving flowers after a performance, with Royal Opera House 2012 written in the caption. The last page contained a photo that made Beatrice hold her breath. Francis teaching a roughly 3-year-old Sophia a ballet pose, both of them laughing. The happiness in that image was almost palpable. "What are you doing here?" Edward's stern voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway, still in his work suit, his face a mask of irritation. "I'm sorry." Beatrice closed the album quickly. "I was just—" "This part of the house is off limits," he said, approaching and taking the album from her hands. "I thought I had made that clear during the tour." "Actually, you didn't mention this room," Beatrice replied, regaining her composure. Then, deciding to take a risk, she added, "She was a ballerina, wasn't she? Francis." The name seemed to hit Edward like a physical blow. For a moment, his mask of control faltered. "That is not relevant to your work with Sophia," he finally responded. "Yes, it is," Beatrice insisted. "Sophia responds to music and dance in a way she responds to nothing else. Now I understand why." Edward put the album in a drawer, locking it with a small key he carried in his pocket. "I won't discuss this. Dancing no longer belongs in this house." "But it clearly belongs to Sophia," Beatrice argued. "She holds that music box like a treasure. The melody means something special to her." "Enough," the word echoed in the empty room. Edward took a deep breath, composing himself. "I'm sorry, but I need you to respect my decisions regarding my daughter's upbringing. Even if those decisions are preventing her from expressing herself in the only way that seems to work for her." The ensuing silence was thick with tension. Finally, Edward spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Beatrice, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you've only been here for a week. You don't know the full story." "Then tell me," she pleaded. "Help me understand." He looked out the window at the night outside. For a moment it seemed he might open up, but then his posture stiffened again. "It's late. We both need to rest. Good night, Beatrice." And with that, he left, leaving her alone with unanswered questions. and the growing certainty that the key to helping Sophia was somehow tied to the past Edward was so desperately trying to bury. The next day, while working with Sophia on sensory activities, Beatrice noticed something on the music box the girl always carried. When Sophia went to the bathroom accompanied by Mrs. Celeste, Beatrice examined the object more closely. Turning it over, she discovered something engraved on the bottom. For Clara, who dances among the stars, with eternal love, Francis. Clara, a name she had never heard before. Who was Clara, and why would Sophia's music box have a dedication to someone else? Beatrice returned the box to its exact spot, but her mind was buzzing with new questions. There was more to this story than Edward was willing to reveal, and she was determined to find the truth, not out of curiosity, but because she felt, with growing intensity, that the cure for Sophia's silence depended on it. The discovery of the name Clara engraved on the music box became a central piece of the puzzle Beatrice was trying to assemble. For the next 2 weeks, she continued her work with Sophia, officially respecting Edward's ban on dancing activities, but carefully observing how the girl responded to musical stimuli during other activities. Sophia showed an extraordinary sensitivity to rhythms. During art therapy sessions, her drawings became more colorful and defined when there was music in the background. Her movements became more fluid, less rigid, and eye contact, still rare and brief, occurred more frequently. Beatrice meticulously documented every reaction, building a case to present to Edward when the time was right. Meanwhile, she tried to learn more about the family's past without raising suspicion. It was Mrs. Celeste who, inadvertently, offered the first significant clue. One morning, while helping to organize materials in the activity room, the housekeeper mentioned an old box of videotapes she had found while cleaning the attic. They were in a trunk that no one had opened in years, she explained. They're recordings of Miss Frances's performances at the Royal Opera House. Mr. Miles had everything put away, but I thought you might like to see them, to better understand our Sophia. Beatrice hesitated. Watching these videos without permission felt like an even greater invasion of privacy than looking through the photo album. On the other hand, any information could be crucial to helping Sophia. He doesn't have to know, Mrs. Celeste added with a knowing look. We all just want what's best for the girl. That afternoon, while Sophia was resting and Edward was at his office in London, Beatrice watched the recordings on her laptop. The screen showed a stunning Frances Miles, flawlessly executing the steps of Swan Lake. Her grace and stage presence were mesmerizing. In another, more informal recording, Frances was practicing in a private studio, laughing as she tried to teach a visibly clumsy Edward some basic steps. The contrast between that smiling man and the stern businessman Beatrice knew was striking. The last video, however, was the one that made her heart stop. Frances, wearing a simple dress, was dancing with a roughly 3-year-old Sophia, holding her little hands as she twirled gently. The melody in the background was exactly the same as the music boxes. "Show Grandma Clara how beautifully you dance," Frances said in the video, as the camera panned to show an elderly woman sitting in an armchair, applauding with tears in her eyes. Clara, Sophia's grandmother, Frances's mother. The piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The music box had likely belonged to Clara before it was passed to Sophia. When the video ended, Beatrice realized she wasn't alone. Sophia was standing in the doorway, watching the screen with unusual intensity. "Sophia, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had woken up," Beatrice said, quickly closing the laptop. The girl approached and, to Beatrice's surprise, touched the closed computer screen, then pointed to herself. "Yes, that's you in the video," Beatrice confirmed, "with your mother." Sophia picked up the music box, which she always carried with her, and placed it next to the laptop, making a connection between the two objects. Then, in a gesture that made Beatrice hold her breath, the girl began to replicate the exact same steps she had performed in the video with Frances. "You remember," Beatrice whispered, amazed. "You remember dancing with your mother." Sophia's dancing was different now. It wasn't just random movements. There was purpose, muscle memory, as if her body remembered what her mind had blocked. Impulsively, Beatrice stood up and joined the girl, following her steps. For nearly 15 minutes, they danced the silent waltz together, connected in a communication that transcended words. It was at that moment that the door opened fully, revealing Edward Miles. His face, normally impassive, showed a mixture of shock and fury. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Sophia immediately stopped her dance, retreating to a corner of the room with the music box held tightly against her chest. "Edward," Beatrice began, trying to maintain her composure. "Sophia was just—" "I saw what was happening," he interrupted. "First the videos, now this. After I made it explicitly clear that I didn't want dancing back in this house." "She remembers," Beatrice insisted. "Sophia remembers dancing with Francis. It's a vital emotional connection that we can't ignore." "You have no right," he said, striding across the room. "You have no right to unearth these memories." "What memories, Edward? The happy ones? The ones that show Sophia communicating through dance. Why is that so threatening to you?" Edward closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting a physical pain. When he opened them again, his decision was made. "Beatrice, I appreciate your work so far, but I think we've made a mistake. I will ask Martha to find another specialist for Sophia." The dismissal caught Beatrice by surprise, despite the growing tension. "You're firing me for trying to help your daughter?" "I am ending our agreement because you disrespected my direct instructions on how to raise my daughter," he corrected. "Please pack your things. I will arrange for your transport and a generous severance package." "This isn't about money," Beatrice protested, feeling tears of frustration welling in her eyes. "It's about Sophia. Look at her now." Sophia was huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth, a self-regulating behavior Beatrice hadn't seen since her first days at the manor. "You are causing more harm than good," Edward accused. "This matter is closed." Beatrice looked at Sophia, then at Edward. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll go. But first, I need you to answer one question. Who is Clara?" The question hit Edward like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, leaning on the nearest table. Where did you hear that name?" "It's engraved on the music box," Beatrice replied. "For Clara, who dances among the stars, with eternal love, Francis." Edward looked at the music box in Sophia's hands, as if truly seeing it for the first time. "Clara was Francis's mother," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. "Sophia adored her. He stopped, unable to continue. "Edward," Beatrice took a step toward him, softening her voice. "What happened to your family?" For a moment it seemed he would answer. His face showed a vulnerability Beatrice had never witnessed, but then, like a door slamming shut, his expression hardened again. "Please, pack your bags. The driver will be available in 2 hours." And with that, he left, leaving Beatrice with Sophia, who continued her rhythmic rocking in the corner, clutching the music box to her chest. Defeated, Beatrice knelt beside the girl. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I tried." To her surprise, Sophia reached out and touched her face, a gesture of connection that made Beatrice hold her breath. It wasn't just a touch. It was communication. There was awareness, in the girl's eyes, an understanding that transcended her condition. Then Sophia opened the music box and, for the first time in Beatrice's presence, wound the crank herself, letting the melody fill the room. That deliberate gesture was the confirmation Beatrice needed. There was a path for Sophia through music and dance. If Edward couldn't see it, perhaps he was blinded by his own pain. 2 hours later, Beatrice finished packing her bags, her heart heavy. She decided to leave a note for Edward, even though she knew it would probably be ignored. She wrote carefully, "Edward, Sophia communicates through dance as other children use words. To deny her that is to deny her a voice. I know there is pain in your past, but Sophia's present shouldn't be sacrificed for it. The music box is her connection to her mother and grandmother, a lineage of love that transcends time. When you are ready to let music back into this house, I will be available to help. Until then, thank you for the opportunity to know your extraordinary daughter, Beatrice Oliver." She left the note on her bedroom desk and went downstairs for a final goodbye. Mrs. Celeste was waiting for her in the hall, visibly upset. "You don't agree with this, do you?" Beatrice asked. The housekeeper shook her head. "Mr. Miles hasn't been the same since that day. But I thought you could help him overcome it. Help Sophia overcome it too." "What really happened, Mrs. Celeste?" Beatrice couldn't help but ask, even knowing it was improper. The housekeeper looked around, making sure they were alone. "It was a car accident, coming back from the Cotswolds. Miss Frances and Mrs. Clara died instantly. Sophia was in the car but survived almost unharmed, physically at least. After that, she stopped talking, stopped dancing, stopped being the cheerful girl she was. And Edward banned any reminder of dancing because he associates it with the loss," Beatrice concluded, finally understanding. "Yes, he sold Miss Frances's dance studio, donated all her costumes, put away all the photographs. I think he believed that by erasing those memories, he could erase the pain." "But it doesn't work that way," Beatrice murmured. "Especially not for Sophia." "No," Mrs. Celeste agreed. "The girl needs those memories. They're all she has of her mother." The sound of a car horn interrupted their conversation. The driver had arrived. Beatrice hugged the housekeeper, asking her to take care of Sophia. Then, with a heavy heart, she got into the car that would take her back to London, to her small apartment in Chinatown, and the life she had left behind just a few weeks before. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Edward Miles was in his office, reading and rereading her note, with unshed tears in his eyes, and that Sophia, in her room, was dancing alone to the sound of the music box, for the first time since the day her life had changed forever. 3 days passed with no news from the Hawthorne Manor. Beatrice reconnected with old colleagues, starting to look for a new job, trying to ignore the emptiness she felt since leaving Sophia. During sleepless nights, she replayed every moment with the girl, every small breakthrough, wondering if she could have done more, if she could have convinced Edward to see beyond his pain. On the evening of the 3rd day, her apartment doorbell rang. Beatrice, already in her pajamas and preparing for another restless night, was surprised by the late visit. She looked through the peephole, and her heart leaped. Edward Miles was standing in the hallway, holding the note she had left. With trembling hands, she opened the door. "Edward?" He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and an unshaven face, a far cry from the always impeccable CEO. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Beatrice stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Her small apartment, with its simple furniture and book-lined walls, seemed even smaller with Edward's imposing presence. "I'm sorry to show up like this," he began, remaining standing in the middle of the room, "but after reading your note, I couldn't stop thinking." Beatrice gestured to the sofa where they both sat. "Did something happen to Sophia?" she asked, concerned. "She stopped eating," Edward replied, rubbing his face with his hands. "Not completely, but almost. She refuses to leave her room. And," he hesitated, "the music box won't stop playing, day and night. She's communicating," Beatrice explained, "in the only way she can." Edward nodded slowly. "I think you were right. And I'm scared, Beatrice." "Scared of what?" He looked at her, and for the first time Beatrice clearly saw the pain in Edward's dark eyes, the same pain she had seen in Sophia's. Scared of remembering, scared of moving on, scared of losing Sophia too. Thus began a conversation that would last until dawn. Edward finally opened up about the accident, about finding Sophia in the hospital, physically almost unharmed but emotionally devastated, clinging to the music box that Clara had always kept with her. "The box belonged to Clara," he explained. "Frances gave it to her when she decided to pursue a career in ballet against her father's wishes. It was a symbol of the freedom Clara never had but ensured for her daughter." Beatrice listened, allowing Edward to finally release. Years of pent-up grief. He spoke of how he met Frances at a performance at the Royal Opera House, how he fell in love with her energy and passion for life, how they married, despite the objections of his conservative parents, who saw no future in a relationship with a ballerina. "I loved dancing because I loved Frances," Edward confessed, as the sun began to rise through the windows of Beatrice's small apartment. After the accident, I couldn't bear it. Every musical note felt like a knife. Beatrice poured another cup of coffee. And Sophia, did you ask what she felt? Edward looked down. How could I? She stopped speaking. The doctors said it was selective mutism, a response to trauma. At first, we tried conventional therapies, but nothing worked. Over time, I think I accepted her silence as permanent. But she never stopped communicating, Beatrice pointed out. She just changed the method. Dancing is her language now, Edward. He remained silent for a long moment. What should I do? He finally asked. Let her dance, Beatrice replied simply. Let her reconnect with that part of herself and with the memory of her mother. The vulnerability on Edward's face was palpable. I don't know if I can. Seeing Sophia dance, it's like seeing a ghost of Francis. It's not a ghost, Beatrice corrected gently. It's a legacy. It's life, Edward. The first morning light illuminated the small living room, casting shadows and highlighting the exhausted expressions on both their faces after the night of confessions. Edward stood up, walking to the window. Would you come back? He asked, his back still to her. To help Sophia, and maybe me too? Beatrice didn't hesitate. Yes. That same afternoon, Beatrice returned to the Hawthorne Manor. Sophia, upon seeing her enter, dropped the puzzle she was unenthusiastically playing with and ran into her arms, the first spontaneous hug she had given anyone since the accident. I missed you too, Beatrice whispered, moved. Mrs. Celeste, watching the scene, couldn't hold back her tears. Edward remained at a distance, visibly uncomfortable, but he didn't interfere. In the following days, Beatrice implemented a gradual program that incorporated elements of dance therapy into her sessions with Sophia. They started with simple, improvised movements without expectations or structure. The girl responded with growing enthusiasm, using her body to express what words could not. Edward watched occasionally, always from the doorway, never fully entering the room. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, pain, nostalgia, and a faint glimmer of hope. On a particularly productive afternoon, Beatrice had an idea. Sophia, let's create our own dance language. Each movement can mean something different. The girl tilted her head, curious, as Beatrice demonstrated. Look, this twirl can mean I'm happy, and this downward motion can be hello. Sophia mimicked the gestures, then, surprisingly, created a new one, a small jump followed by a fluid movement of her hands. What does it mean? Beatrice asked, delighted by the initiative. The girl repeated the movement, then pointed at Beatrice. Is it about me? She smiled. Maybe it means Beatrice. Sophia nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. Day after day, they built this physical vocabulary, a movement for yes, another for no, gestures for water, food, tired. Sophia learned quickly, eager for this new way to make herself understood. Edward, informed of the progress, began to watch the sessions for longer periods, occasionally asking questions afterward. Does she really understand what she's doing? He asked once after Sophia had conversed with Beatrice for nearly 20 minutes through dance. Every movement is intentional, Beatrice assured him. She's creating meaning, Edward. She's communicating. If you learn this language too. He backed away, not yet ready. One step at a time. On a rainy morning, while they were working in the library, Sophia did something unexpected. She took Beatrice by the hand to a specific bookshelf and pointed insistently upward. Beatrice reached for the indicated spot and found, hidden among business books, a worn copy of The History of Ballet. Do you want to read this? She asked, surprised. Sophia shook her head, then opened the book, revealing what was hidden inside. A photograph of Francis in a white swan costume with a dedication on the back. For my little ballerina Sophia, who will one day dance in the clouds like me. All my love, Mom. Beatrice held back her emotion. You knew this was here the whole time? Sophia made the movement that meant yes, then performed a sequence that Beatrice already recognized as Show Daddy. You want to show this to your father? Beatrice hesitated. Are you sure? The girl repeated the gesture with more emphasis. That night, after Sophia had gone to sleep, Beatrice took the photograph to Edward's office. He examined it for long moments, tracing the outline of Francis's face with his finger. Sophia found this, Beatrice explained, and she wanted you to see it. Why? His voice was almost inaudible. I think she's trying to build a bridge, Edward, between the past and the present, between the two of you. A week later, Beatrice suggested something bold. I'd like to have access to Francis's old dance studio, if it still exists. Edward tensed visibly. I sold the studio. I don't mean the commercial one. Mrs. Celeste mentioned there was a space on the property, a converted greenhouse where Francis used to practice. He stood up, restless. It's been closed for years. It could be a safe space for Sophia to explore this form of expression more deeply, Beatrice argued. A special place, different from the rooms where we do the other therapies. After much internal debate, Edward agreed to show her the place. The old greenhouse was at the back of the property, partially hidden by vines that had grown rampant over the years. The interior was dusty and neglected, but it still contained the essentials. A wooden floor, ballet bars installed on the walls, and large mirrors, though they were covered with sheets. It was her sanctuary, Edward explained, his voice thick with emotion. She came here every day, even after Sophia was born. She said the natural light was perfect for dancing. Beatrice watched as the afternoon light filtered through the dirty windows, creating golden patterns on the dusty floor. It's beautiful, she murmured. Can we restore it? Edward looked around, as if seeing ghosts dancing in the dark corners. I don't know if I can come here regularly. You don't have to, Beatrice assured him. This would be a space for Sophia initially, but maybe someday? Surprisingly, Edward nodded. I'll arrange for the cleaning and necessary repairs. The transformation of the greenhouse happened quickly. Within a week, the space was clean, the mirrors uncovered, the floor polished. Beatrice brought in colourful cushions, plants, and a small sound system. The place, once ghostly in its abandonment, now radiated with possibilities. When Sophia saw the restored greenhouse, her reaction was extraordinary. She walked through the space as if on hallowed ground, touching the bars, the mirrors, the walls. Then she looked at Beatrice with tear-filled eyes and made a new movement, hands crossed over her heart, then extended forward. What does it mean? Beatrice asked, though she felt she already knew. Sophia repeated the gesture, then pointed to a photo of Francis that Beatrice had discreetly placed in a corner. Is it thank you, or maybe love? The girl made the yes gesture, then the show daddy gesture again. You want your father to see this place too? Another, more emphatic, yes. Beatrice hesitated. He might not be ready, Sophia. The girl made another gesture, closed fists that slowly opened like blooming flowers. It was a new movement that Beatrice didn't recognize. What does that mean? Sophia repeated the gesture, then pointed to a photo of Edward that was next to Francis's. Something to do with your father. Sophia nodded, repeated the movement, then made the gesture that meant time. Time for your father, Beatrice tried to interpret. He needs time to open up, to change. An enthusiastic yes. Beatrice smiled, amazed at the wisdom of this 8-year-old child, whom many considered limited. In the following weeks, the greenhouse became Sophia's sanctuary. There, under Beatrice's gentle guidance, she explored movements, created sequences, and expressed emotions through her body. Beatrice documented everything, creating a dictionary of gestures that she shared. With Mrs. Celeste and the other professionals working with the girl, Edward kept his distance, but Beatrice noticed his growing curiosity. Occasionally, she would find him examining the gesture dictionary or watching videos of the sessions she recorded. It was slow but steady progress. A significant breakthrough came from an unexpected place. While searching the manor's storage for materials for sensory activities, Beatrice found a sealed box with Francis written on it by hand. She hesitated to open it, but her intuition told her it might contain something important. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, was a pair of pink, ballet slippers, visibly worn but well preserved. A tag identified them. First professional pair, debut at the Royal Opera House 2009. Beatrice brought her discovery to Edward, who was in his office. "I found this," she said simply, placing the box on his desk. Edward looked at the slippers for a long moment, then touched them reverently. "She kept every pair, said each one told a story." "Edward," Beatrice chose her words carefully, "I think Sophia should have these slippers." He looked up, alarmed. "They're too small for her." Not to wear necessarily, but as a tangible connection to her mother, something that belonged to Francis, that was part of her passion. Edward closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, there was determination in his gaze. "I'll give them to her myself." The next morning, Edward appeared at the greenhouse for the first time since its restoration. Sophia was in the middle of a sequence of movements with Beatrice, but stopped immediately upon seeing her father, her eyes wide with surprise. "May I come in?" he asked, hesitant. Sophia made the yes gesture enthusiastically. Edward approached, holding the box. "I brought something for you, my dear." The girl looked curiously at the box. When Edward opened it, revealing the slippers, Sophia stood motionless for several seconds. Then, with slightly trembling hands, she touched the worn fabric, the ribbons, the point shoes that showed signs of the effort of countless performances. Then, to the astonishment of Beatrice and Edward, Sophia hugged the slippers to her chest and began to cry, the first tears she had shed since the accident. They were not tears of sadness, but of recognition, of connection, of love. Edward knelt beside his daughter, unsure how to react. Sophia, still holding the slippers with one arm, used the other to make the gesture Beatrice recognized as hug. "She wants you to hug her," Beatrice translated, her voice filled with emotion. Edward wrapped his daughter in his arms, holding back his own tears. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I tried to take this from you." The barrier had been broken. In the following days, Edward began to timidly participate in the sessions in the greenhouse, at first just observing, then asking questions, and finally trying to learn some of the gestures that made up Sophia's silent language. "It's incredible," he commented one afternoon, as he watched Sophia perform a complex sequence of movements. "I never realized how much she understands, how much she wants to communicate." "We all want to be understood," Beatrice replied. "Sophia just found a different path." It was Edward who suggested, to Beatrice's surprise, that they organize a small performance. "Just for us and a few close people," he explained, "to celebrate her progress and to honor Francis." The project quickly became the focus of everyone in the house. The greenhouse was decorated with delicate lights and flowers. Sophia, more enthusiastic than ever, spent hours practicing her choreography with Beatrice. She insisted on wearing a simple white dress, nothing elaborate, and her mother's slippers, even though they were too big for her feet. On the night of the performance, only 6 people made up the audience. Edward, Mrs. Celeste, Sophia's 2 private tutors, her occupational therapist, and the doctor who had been treating her since the accident. The anticipation was palpable. Beatrice, serving as narrator, briefly explained the meaning of the movements Sophia had created, the body language they had developed together, and how dance had become a vital form of communication for the girl. When the music began, the same melody from the music box, but orchestrated in a fuller version that Edward had specially commissioned, Sophia emerged from behind a screen, barefoot, holding her mother's slippers. What followed left everyone speechless. Sophia didn't just dance, she told a story with her body. A story of loss, of loneliness, but also of hope and reconnection. Her movements, sometimes fluid, sometimes abrupt, conveyed an emotion that transcended the need for words. At the end, Sophia placed the slippers in the center of the greenhouse and gave a simple curtsy. The emotional audience gave her a standing ovation. Edward, tears streaming freely down his face, was the first to rise and go to his daughter. Sophia looked at her father, then at Beatrice, who was watching from a distance. The girl gestured for her to join them. When Beatrice approached, Sophia took her hand and Edward's, joining them together. Then she made the gesture that meant, family. No words could better express what was happening in that moment. A healing that was beginning, not just for Sophia, but for all of them. A month after the performance in the greenhouse, life at the Hawthorne Manor had found a new rhythm. Sophia's language of gestures had become part of the household's daily life. Even the newest staff members learned the basic movements to communicate with the girl. Beatrice coordinated this process with dedication, creating illustrated guides and practice sessions for everyone. The relationship between Edward and Sophia also flourished, finding a balance that had seemed impossible for years. Every night before bed, father and daughter had their special moment. They would dance briefly to the sound of the music box, a tradition that began timidly but soon became sacred to both. As for Beatrice, her position in the house had transformed. She was no longer just Sophia's tutor, but an essential presence in the family's life. Her relationship with Edward evolved gradually, built on mutual respect and a shared goal: Sophia's well-being. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, while Sophia was practicing in the greenhouse under Mrs. Celeste's supervision, Edward invited Beatrice for a walk through the gardens. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he commented as they walked among fragrant rose bushes, "about what more we can do to help Sophia." "She has progressed incredibly," Beatrice replied. "Her communication expands every day." "Yes, but I'm thinking beyond that." Edward stopped, looking at the imposing manor. "This house was built to impress, not to welcome. Francis always said that." Beatrice smiled, imagining the ballerina's frankness confronting Edward's corporate world. "She was right," he continued, "and now I realize we can do something more meaningful with all this space, with the resources we have." "What do you have in mind?" Edward turned to her, his eyes shining with an energy Beatrice had rarely seen. "I want to create a foundation in Francis's name, an arts center for neurodivergent children." Beatrice felt a wave of emotion. "Edward, that would be wonderful. We could start right here, using the greenhouse and other areas of the property," he explained enthusiastically. "Then who knows, expand to other locations, offer dance, music, visual arts, all forms of expression that are often more accessible than words for these children." "You would be turning your pain into something extraordinarily positive," Beatrice observed, touched by the idea. "I wouldn't do it alone," Edward replied, taking Beatrice's hands in his. "I would like you to direct the project, Beatrice. No one understands what we're trying to create better than you." The proposal took her by surprise. "Me? But my experience is limited to—" "Transforming lives," Edward interrupted gently. "To seeing possibilities where others see only limitations. To bringing music into silent houses." Beatrice's eyes welled up. The trust Edward placed in her was moving, but there was something more to his invitation, a recognition of the special bond that had formed between them. "I would need a team," she began to plan, already swept up in the idea. "Therapists, educators, artists." "You will have everything you need," Edward assured her. "And more importantly, you will have Sophia as our first ambassador." The girl, as if sensing they were talking about her, came running through the garden, followed by Mrs. Celeste, who was trying to keep up. Sophia stopped before them, breathless and smiling, making a rapid sequence of gestures. "She's saying she created a new movement and wants to show us," Beatrice translated. Edward crouched down to his daughter's level. "We can't wait to see it, Princess." Sophia executed a complex movement that involved a twirl followed by an imaginary hug, ending with her hands extended forward, as if offering something. "It's beautiful," Edward commented. "What does it mean?" The girl pointed at Beatrice, then at her father, and repeated the movement. "I think she's created a gesture for the two of us," Beatrice suggested, her voice thick with emotion. "For us, together." Edward looked at Sophia, then at Beatrice, and something in his gaze shifted, a decision being made, a step being taken. "Sophia has always been more perceptive than we imagined," he said, standing up again. Then, to Beatrice's surprise, Edward formally extended his hand. "Miss Oliver, would you grant me this dance?" Right there in the garden, with Sophia clapping in approval and Mrs. Celeste dabbing at her tears, Edward and Beatrice danced without music, except for the one that existed in their hearts. It wasn't a technically perfect dance. Edward was still clumsy in his steps, but there was a sincerity, a connection that transcended technique. In the following months, the idea for the foundation began to take concrete shape. Edward converted the east wing of the manor into offices and classrooms, hired architects to design spaces, adapted to the sensory needs of different children, and began the process of registering the Francis Miles Foundation for Inclusive Arts. Beatrice threw herself into the project with passion, researching methodologies, recruiting professionals, and developing curricula. Her experience with Sophia became the cornerstone of the Foundation's philosophy. The belief that every child has a unique voice, even when that voice is not expressed through words. Sophia, for her part, blossomed. Her vocabulary of gestures expanded exponentially, and she began to show an interest in teaching others, becoming a little instructor for the first children who came to the Foundation's pilot programs. It was during one of these initial sessions that what everyone would later call the miracle occurred. Sophia was demonstrating a movement for a boy with severe autism when the little one, frustrated at not being able to replicate the gesture, began to cry. Edward, who was observing discreetly, entered the room to help. "It's okay, son," he said gently, crouching beside the boy. "It takes time to learn." Sophia approached, watching the interaction. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, she placed a hand on her father's shoulder and said, in a low but clear voice, "Daddy, let me show him." The silence that followed was absolute. Edward froze, unable to believe what he had just heard. Beatrice, on the other side of the room, dropped the clipboard she was holding. "Sophia?" Edward whispered, turning slowly to his daughter. "You spoke?" The girl nodded, a small smile on her face. "I always knew how," she said, the words coming out slowly, as if unearthed from a deep place. "I just couldn't find a reason to talk." Edward hugged his daughter tightly, the tears impossible to contain. Beatrice joined them, equally emotional, while the other children and therapists watched the extraordinary scene. Later, after the initial commotion had subsided, doctors explained that cases like Sophia's, though rare, did happen. Children who developed selective mutism after severe trauma could eventually resume speaking when they found a safe environment and sufficient motivation to reconnect with that ability. It wasn't a medical miracle, Sophia's neurologist explained. It was a human miracle. You built an environment where she feels safe enough to express herself again. In the following days, Sophia spoke more, always in short, simple sentences, often interspersed with her dance gestures, which remained her preferred form of communication. She explained in her own way that stopping speaking had not been a conscious choice. The words had simply disappeared after the accident, as if hibernating in some corner of her mind. "Dancing helped me find the words again," she told Beatrice during a session in the greenhouse. "Like they were hidden in my body, not in my head." Sophia's gradual recovery of speech added a new dimension to the Foundation's work. Beatrice incorporated this unique perspective into the programs, emphasizing how different forms of expression, movement, art, music could create alternative neurological pathways for skills that seemed lost or never developed. 6 months after the Foundation's creation, Edward organized a formal event to officially introduce it to London society. The chosen venue was symbolic, the Royal Opera House where Frances had shone as a ballerina. On the stage that had once belonged to her mother, Sophia would perform a special choreography, accompanied by other children from the program. The night of the event arrived, with the theatre filled with distinguished guests, business leaders, politicians, artists, journalists. Beatrice, wearing an elegant blue gown, supervised the final details backstage, while Edward greeted guests in the foyer. Among those present were many of Frances's former colleagues from the ballet company, moved to see her legacy continue in such a meaningful way. Specialists in inclusive education from all over the UK also attended, eager to learn about the pioneering methodology the Foundation was developing. When the lights dimmed and the chatter ceased, Edward took the stage for a brief speech. "Good evening, everyone," he began, visibly emotional. A few years ago, I lost more than my wife in that accident. I lost my ability to hear music, to see beauty, to believe in new beginnings. And in many ways, I also lost my daughter, who retreated into a silent world where I could not reach her. The audience listened in respectful silence. Francis always said that dance was a way of making the soul's music visible. I didn't truly understand what that meant until Sophia, through her silent dance, began to show me. And until an extraordinary person came into our lives with enough courage to challenge my certainties and the wisdom to see beyond the silence. Edward gestured toward the wings, and Beatrice reluctantly joined him on stage to warm applause. Tonight, Edward continued, holding Beatrice's hand, we celebrate not just the launch of a foundation, but a journey of healing. A reminder that, even in the darkest moments, the music never truly stops. It just plays at frequencies we need to relearn how to hear. The curtains opened, revealing Sophia at the center of the stage, wearing a simple white dress and the slippers that had belonged to her mother, now resized to fit her. Beside her were 6 other children, with different neurodivergent conditions, all participants in the Foundation's pilot program. The performance that followed moved even the most skeptical. It wasn't a technically perfect show. Some children hesitated in their movements, others occasionally lost the rhythm. But the authenticity and pure joy were undeniable. Sophia led the group with surprising confidence, discreetly helping her peers when needed, demonstrating an empathy many would have considered impossible for a child with her history. At the end, when the children took their collective bow, the audience erupted in applause. Edward and Beatrice joined the group on stage, and Sophia, in a spontaneous gesture that drew emotional gasps from the spectators, took the microphone. "My name is Sophia Miles," she said, her voice small but clear, filling the theater through the speakers. "When I lost my mom, I also lost my voice, but I never lost the music inside me." A reverent silence fell over the theater. "My mom always said that dance is the poetry of the foot," Sophia continued, with a wisdom that transcended her 9 years. "Tonight we dance for all the children who are still searching for their own poetry." The applause that followed lasted for several minutes. Journalists snapped photos, social critics scribbled frantic notes, potential sponsors exchanged business cards. The Francis Miles Foundation for Inclusive Arts had officially arrived, promising to transform the lives of countless children. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children had been taken home, Edward, Beatrice, and Sophia remained in the nearly empty theater. On the stage, where so many dreams had been realized, Edward took out the small music box that Sophia always carried. "I think it's time for this to play in public again," he said, winding the crank. The delicate melody filled the theater, echoing off the historic walls. Edward extended his hand to Beatrice, who accepted it with a smile. Sophia joined them, and the 3 of them danced together under the single spotlight that remained lit, their elongated shadows projecting onto the wall behind them. No longer 3 separate people, but a family united by something stronger than blood: choice, perseverance, and love. In the week that followed, life continued its course at the Hawthorne Manor, now partially converted into the Foundation's headquarters. Children arrived for classes every afternoon, bringing life and movement to spaces that had long remained empty. The greenhouse, once a mausoleum of painful memories, now overflowed with laughter and music. On a sunny afternoon, while Sophia was helping a new student learn a simple movement, Edward found Beatrice in the garden, organizing materials for the next outdoor class. "The lawyers finalized the Foundation's documents," he commented, sitting beside her on the stone bench. "Everything is official." "That's wonderful," Beatrice replied, smiling. "Francis would be proud." Edward nodded, looking up at the blue autumn sky. "I've been thinking a lot about time, Beatrice, about how it can be both so cruel and so generous." "How so?" "Cruel because it takes people we love from us," he explained. "Generous because eventually it brings others who help us rebuild." Beatrice felt a blush rise to her cheeks. In recent months, her relationship with Edward had deepened, but they had both maintained a respectful distance, prioritizing Sophia's well-being and the Foundation's development. "Beatrice," Edward continued, turning to face her directly. I know our beginning was complicated, but I want you to know that what I feel for you transcends gratitude. It's something I never expected to feel again. Before she could respond, Sophia came, running up, her eyes shining with excitement. Daddy! Bea, come see! Mariana did the move we've been practicing for weeks. Edward smiled, discreetly taking Beatrice's hand. We're coming, Princess. Together they followed Sophia to the greenhouse, where a girl of about 7 with Down syndrome was proudly executing a perfect twirl. The other students applauded enthusiastically, creating a circle of support and celebration. In that moment, watching the scene, Beatrice felt a profound certainty. She had found her place in the world, not just professionally, but emotionally. This improvised family, this manor transformed into a haven of healing, this legacy, built on pain but flourishing in joy, all of it was now a part of her, just as she was a part of it all. The music from the box, which had once symbolized loss, now cradled a new story. A story of interrupted steps that eventually found their rhythm again. A story of silences that turned into dances, of absences that gave way to new presences, of families reconfigured by love and choice. As Edward hugged Sophia with one arm and held Beatrice close with the other, the melody continued, invisible yet palpable, connecting past, present, and future in a perfect choreography of redemption. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Beatrice, Edward, and Sophia has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments.